regarding the California SB 919 legislation and the Responsible Franchising Initiative. I want to separate the two things that are happening here. There is a difference between the headline and the hype and the details behind the headline. We teach franchise brokers and their candidates that when they're researching a franchise, they need to look beyond the headline and the hype and into the franchise's track record. Now here, we're doing the exact same thing. The headline of responsible franchising and removing bad actors is a worthy goal. However, the details of the bill's language and its consequences are what we are discussing here. These are two separate issues, the headline versus the details in the language. It's the language of the act and the disclosure that we disagree will accomplish the stated goals. We also don't agree with the methods used to be responsible in franchising. This is something we're gonna discuss in another post though. To clarify, we are not working against the act. We're working to try and make sure that the act can be complied with as a practical matter and that the focus stays on bad franchising actors, not potential clerical errors or omissions that have nothing to do with the franchise being purchased. So, for example, how can the omission of a franchise for a deal done by an entirely different franchisor that the broker was working on be harmful to an unrelated franchisee, with the consequence that is as high as requiring the broker to be responsible for the full investment as a result of such an error? Well, our position is that the punishment doesn't match the crime. The administrative error doesn't match the consequence of the full investment returned by someone who is a non-decision-making party, also known as the franchise broker. This is simply what we're trying to bring to light, and it's important to modify this language for brokers to actually continue being able to work and send new business into the state of California. Okay, so now that we have some of that background done, what are we doing today? Well, the bill is on Governor Newsom's desk right now. And so currently we have an opposition letter that we're sending to the governor. And we're doing this because the affected parties, the key stakeholders who have to comply with the act, franchise brokers, were not truly represented in this legislation. And we need to make sure that the governor knows this, as well as a host of other key issues. We're also doing this because we want to put on record the items of opposition for California and for the other lawmakers to be aware that they must be included in an accurate representation of franchise brokers in any future proposed legislation. Now, we are doing this to protect franchises with under 500 units in their growth phase and to protect the franchisees who benefit from the good work that franchise brokers do. We are doing this to ask that the language be corrected and that the law become simplified, manageable, and workable, not an overreaching law that sets the broker and the FSO up as the fall guy. We have to do this. We have to do our civic duty and speak up, because if we won't speak up for ourselves, why would anyone else speak up for us? In fact, a legislator representative actually contacted me and told me that he would suggest we submit an official opposition statement to ensure that our position was heard. He told me that we can either have one statement that a number of people sign on to, or have many statements, but that one with many people signing it would be just as effective so long as they agreed with the language in the statement. And in researching further on the California Senate legislation site, the bill authors and the sponsors were instructed to get affected parties included in these discussions. This was on the April 15th Senate Standing Committee hearing. Now, I have not spoken to any affected party that has stated they support the language of the bill. People are stating their support for the headline, but not the language. Anyone, any broker group or FSO who reads and understands the language of the act would not be for it. No reasonable person would accept the liability of, let's say, $1 million for the benefit of $25,000 for factors they cannot control and with ample opportunities to make mistakes. But people are afraid to speak up. And as a result, they're resigning to simply pulling out of California for future franchise development. Now, I do not believe that the intended goal of the legislator is to have people leave the state, because this bill is going to carry a significant cost. And with that, the state needs fees to offset that cost. So we cannot be quiet. The legislator is telling us that we need to speak up and to talk to them so that we can ensure it is a measured application in this law. Now, if brokers stop operating in California, the franchisees don't benefit, the franchisors under 500 units don't benefit, the brokers don't benefit, and the state doesn't benefit. Only a few win at the cost of many. Now, oftentimes, when key stakeholders are not involved in a legislation, the legislation might get passed, but it doesn't get adopted by the key stakeholders in practice. The affected parties, they just leave. I want you to take note that no FSO, broker, or broker network stated support of the bill in its listed support on the California Senate legislator site. So it was only franchisors and the lobbying groups representing the franchisors and franchisees. They're the only ones that stated support for the bill. The lawmakers and legislator was making a point about how much support they got for the bill and how unusual it was to get that kind of agreement. But I pointed out to them that the support is from parties who benefit from the transfer of liability from the franchisee and franchisor to the franchise brokers and FSOs. Again, not for bad acts. The listed support did not come from the affected stakeholders and the regulated parties. And that is a problem in any law. So here are a few points discussed in the opposition statement that we hope you sign. Number 1, Section 31300A has a guilty until proven innocent provision, making the broker prove that they were not negligent and not willful. Now that is very unusual to change the order of due process and make the broker have to prove their innocence. Innocent until proven guilty is how our judicial system operates, not guilty until proven innocent. And that is not something that we should accept, because once we start saying yes to one law that does this, we're setting a new standard for that paradigm with other laws. 2, we are asking to report on the previous year's data, not the current year. Now, if a franchise had to report in real time on the things that they're doing, their financials, their services, their history, their inventory, and their support, that would be the end of franchising. These things change all the time in the course of business. Franchises have the benefit of a look-back window to be able to honestly and accurately comply. And we are asking for the same treatment. To be fair, apply the same rules for the franchise brokers as the franchisors. Real-time updates are unmanageable, and with the risk of being responsible for the entire investment for a single error, it is not prudent for any broker group, or FSO to operate in the state of California. Now, this can be modified in the uniform document and in the act. So think about how careful brokers will have to be, not with their franchisee interactions, but with their registration process in order to avoid being willfully negligent. Now, when you apply this to normal daily practice, it's just not worth the risk. Ranges of commissions are changing all the time, and if the consequence wasn't so high, that would be a more reasonable position. But with the consequence being as high as rescission, meaning the whole investment returned if an error was proven as willful. Now that is a high risk, and brokers are simply not going to operate with that. It's just not worth it. To make $25,000, but let's say $1 million, not because you did something truly harmful, but because you didn't execute properly on an administrative task, is a serious concern, and we're asking for something that's more reasonable and a measured approach. We're asking to report on the previous year's data. 3, calculations for commissions are set by the franchise. Often brokers aren't making those calculations, and I'm not even sure why this is needed, because the broker doesn't have the calculations of the franchisor's decisions and commission calculations. If the disclosure document can make it easy for the brokers to say, I don't know how the commissions are calculated, when they're not a party to those decisions, well, then that would be needed. Another option is to report on the previous year so that the brokers can attempt to get those calculations from the franchise. Without that, having this updated in real time is excessive. It is not the broker doing the work. It's the franchise and the broker network that are doing that work. The results are then reported to the broker on a high level, not through the intricate details. So for a broker to consistently update that and engage in the back and forth with the franchise, collecting their financial calculations is just impractical. In reality, it's a struggle just keeping the franchise's profiles updated, and that takes a massive amount of active work, creating more work where the brokers have to attempt to reach the CFOs and the leadership team of the franchise to regularly determine how the franchise is calculating their fees is fraught with opportunities to make mistakes. The broker can try, but knowing how difficult it is to get data already, it's a losing initiative. Franchisors are busy, and this type of request doesn't impact their results. It simply adds administration to their day-to-day operations. And when you have thousands of brokers asking them how they're calculating their fees every time they do a fee change, well, that's a lot of work on their part. 4, it discusses the use of undefined terms and gives the state's own analysis of how they're concerned with the application of the bill's language and how the state wasn't able to produce any franchise investment case law regarding the use of the term attempting to effect a sale. 5, it discusses the issues with financial and insurance requirements that are likely impossible to execute. Insurance companies, well, they do not take on bad risk. If the broker has to report on actions they don't do, comply with actions they don't control, and be held responsible for actions they don't control, well, no prudent insurance company would accept that risk. And if an insurance company won't, the broker shouldn't either. Insurance companies would say, there is not a way to control the risk, so we're not issuing a policy. And that is a serious issue that is being presented as a reasonable business requirement. However, it's not reasonable when the risk factors are unreasonable. It sets the broker up to fail to comply with the act. Currently, the amount of coverage of insurance and the requirement of financial securities or bonding is not set, but the law states it can be. So without other serious modifications to the language, this poses a significant issue. The law has to be manageable in order to work. Without these changes, it's not manageable. If you agree with this, please review the official opposition statement on the website, where we are tracking and communicating all of these issues. If you agree with them and you want to sign on the opposition letter, please fill out the attached form in the link below. We are collecting 1,000 signatures in opposition of the bill as currently written. It needs to be changed or it's not workable. Remember, you are the leader that we have all been waiting for, and I'm here to show you the power that's inside of you. So give me your heart. I promise to be good to it. Click the heart below and follow me if you're a courageous leader who is ready to stop honoring fear, to start operating in the zone, and to step into your potential.